Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news, although maybe I should just be calling it video game news with small amounts of Yu-Gi-Oh! At the beginning, but that certainly doesn't slip off the tongue specifically well. Today is October 14th, starting a little bit later. I got through the Amazon Prime Early Access sale, whatever, which really wasn't much of a sale. A new Microsoft keyboard and mouse combination, and we now have a new festival to deal with a whole bunch of new things to play. And I was trying to set up and test this keyboard and mouse, and pretty much immediately hated it. So let's. I'm gonna unfortunately start today with one of these Duel lives, so I'm just gonna bring that up. The keyboard, the Microsoft keyboard versus the Logitech keyboard I had, is just significantly shorter throws and less space between the keys. Compared to the curvy ergonomic Logitech keyboard I have. What is the keyboard's number that I've been using for a very, very long time now, probably over a decade plus. Nothing on the back, but yeah, let's see, there probably was a number on this at some point, but it probably got rubbed off as far as just how old and dirty this keyboard is as far as it's being used. I guess it's probably an M500 Logitech keyboard, if I was to guess, since the mouse is a M510, although that may not actually be accurate because I may have replaced the mouse at fairly quickly earlier, and it's the mouse that's been the problem, or I thought it was the mouse, or maybe the mouse pad, or something, but I just thought I'd try something different, and immediately that didn't work. I'm not a huge snob as far as I could be as far as keyboards and mouse. I'm not buying the ridiculous style of $400-$500 keyboards. I don't care if it's a cherry MX red, green, brown, blue, whatever, but the Microsoft keyboard had a button on the left and a button on the right, and just immediately, even as setting it up, my pinky is constantly bumping the button on the right, so I would have had to disable that. And then that means, as far as side buttons, instead of having an up and down button like I do on the M10 Logitech mouse, I would then only have one left side button, which is something you could live with. But then the mouse didn't have a clickiness to it as far as the scroll wheel, and so I didn't enjoy that idea either, of just having this smooth scroll wheel, because I'm just not used to it. You just kind of get used to things, and it would have been a lot smarter for me to have gone to a Best Buy or any place that sells any keyboards and see if they have any keyboards on display, and see if I could find something there. But even at that, the options probably would be very small. You'd have 4, maybe 5 keyboards. Maybe none of them are curved or ergonomic at all, since people really often just want the cheapest non-curved, non-ergonomic keyboards when you're going to like a Best Buy or an Office Depot or someplace like that. But I should have gone and tested it out and checked it out, and didn't really do a lot of research. It's not an incredibly big problem to have an extra mouse and keyboard around, certainly, but it's kind of silly since they are wireless. mouses and keyboards now. I already have a couple extra wired mouse and keyboards sitting around too. The good news there, I think, will be mostly that this is one of maybe 2 gadgets or extra things I bought during the sale. The vast majority of everything else I bought has to do with fixing my irrigation system. Now, there may be some problems there as far as I may not have all the right connectors and all the right setups, so I might end up just going forward and buying more stuff that would be extra stuff for just to get the connectors, because in particular the Orbit irrigation system manifolds are a lot cheaper to buy pre-assembled than they are to buy the individual components there. And so just buying a manifold for $60 to have what would be a $2 component that would cost you $10 if you tried to buy it separately, it's just better to buy it separately. I mean, buy the whole thing, particularly if I know I'm going to use the whole thing at some point in the future. So yeah, that may happen, that may not. I also found out that PEX is not really rated to be outside in the sunshine, so I'm really going to lean heavily on hoping that this edger / inch-and-a-half trencher can really save the day as far as making short work of burying PEX pipe underground. Very, very lightly underground. Almost certainly what will happen is anytime anybody is digging anything, unless they're being particularly careful, that they are going to, in that first shovel thrust into the ground, they're going to hit the PEX pipe and probably damage it or cut it in half. Also, PEX pipe seems to be appealing to like dogs and things to chew on because it has a squishy nature to it, whereas a copper and a PVC pipe above ground wouldn't have so much of a squishy nature to it, so they wouldn't actively seek to chew on it. But yeah, that was pretty much all I bought. There wasn't a lot of fun stuff that I was looking to buy. I was trying to be particularly conservative. I also found out that Amazon's store card gives 5 to 15%, up to 15% on promotional purchases from Amazon.com in general, so there is almost certainly a decent argument to getting the shop card on Amazon and buying everything from Amazon through that card than using my usual card, which is only giving maybe 3%. I think really 1.5% on cash back. We probably skipped some news because I looked and ran the macro early, but OBS here has a new YouTube video out for them as far as beginner's guides to scenes and sources. They are, I think, trying fairly hard to create better education around how to use OBS. Part of the other problem with this mouse is well, mostly I'm fairly certain it was the Unify receiver, the wireless dongle. There was a problem, but the mouse speed did need some adjustments. It needed to be turned up probably 3 or 4 notches as far as where it was, just to move a little bit faster. Part of the problem certainly will come down to the fact that I have like 2 monitors next to each other, and having 2 monitors next to each other does create a scenario where you want to keep on scrolling. I'm also going to take the base, which has bad, messed up slide pads. I'm going to try to take the base plastic components off of my current mouse and take a base of a 510 that I'd already broken and replace the two, instead of just trying to replace the stickers, actively trying to replace the entire plastic part, keeping the stickers on from the old ones still attached to the old plastic, instead of trying to screw this around. Oh man, the way Firefox scrolls is terrible with tabs. Really, really bad. And Yu-Gi-Oh's not much better, certainly, I have to say. Like, the fact that it just doesn't let you end a turn and be done with it, and it's fairly easy to get distracted. So I did reset my computer, so I don't know why Kamiwaza Way of the Thief is here. It's probably a YouTube short thing. Yeah, everything is reloading, so it didn't like automatically load when I relaunched the computer. I may have actually launched the computer a couple times, actually. Noticeably, this is just not loading at all. It's being particularly slow. I think there's a decent argument that I may jump ship back to Chrome. Just because I can use Firefox doesn't mean I have to use Firefox. And if I'm just sitting here waiting for tabs to load because the Firefox browser is so slow, well then that kind of destroys any argument towards using them. As far as news, I'm gonna try and burn through this all fairly quickly. As far as the accountability section, I didn't do anything at all. Like, this is a minor emergency that has happened that has distracted me over most of this week, and probably will lead to more distractions throughout the weekend and next week, and arguably even for the foreseeable future. So I didn't play any more of Sexy Brutale. I did move my side table that is to the right of me, the thing that my mouse pad is sitting on, since I don't have like a full desk in front of me and my TVs are 10 feet away. So I replaced that side table with 2 kind of drawer systems that are a little bit higher, so that's better because they were too low. The table I was using before was too low, and I had a box on top of it, and it was just all very ugly and jerry-rigged. But yeah. that replacing that and moving that allows me now to have drawers where the table didn't have drawers. It does make me have to potentially think about what I'm going to do with my trash can. In all ways, I really shouldn't even have a trash can, because the only time I was using the trash can is when I was throwing candy wrappers in it, and the only reason I was throwing candy wrappers in it is because I was eating in bed, and none of that is good. None of that's what you should do. And honestly, even if I am going to eat in bed, I should just take the candy wrappers to the trash can in the kitchen, because the trash can in the bedroom only gets emptied once every couple of years, so it's just attracting potentially ants and insects and things, and that's not smart. It's just laziness and slovenly lifestyles. Interesting. Desktop ticker is not working at all today. Wonder if there's a reason for that I could really diagnose. Reload feeds. Okay. Well, that wasn't too bad, but I guess the question will be, is the other one working? Yeah, it seems like it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm not even really expecting to do too much over the weekend. I should work on my Raspberry Pi guest Wi-Fi setup and see if I can be done with that this weekend. I should play Zelda Breath of the Wild. There were slightly more digital sales of video games on this Prime Early Access sale than I would have thought. Nothing that really jumped out and screamed, hey, I should buy this, versus something else. I'm fairly certain we talked about this on Wednesday, October's PlayStation Plus catalog and classic titles having been announced, so I think we don't need to cover that again. An official PlayStation YouTube video says Ridge Racer 2 is coming to PlayStation Plus, but it seemed to miss being available this month for premium subscribers, because there were indications certainly that how that was going to work. So this regulation first duel went awfully. Did we make any real progress towards anything? Dueled in one duel. So almost certainly what we're gonna do is just play in this, which is its own rank system, and probably not go anywhere with it. Really succeed within it. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to build a deck that really would work here. I do have a deck that could work if I got really lucky. I've got a deck with some good cards, but not the best of strategies, nor the best of knowledge as to use those strategies. A new Starfield video covers character traits, dialogue, and fuel-based exploration. Bethesda's Todd Howard fields questions from the community, which probably should watch that video at some point. But then there is also a point, I think, around. Let's go ahead and nullify his ability. There really is an argument against just being anti getting hyped around Bethesda games or around anything people like Todd Howard have to say, because they tend to say a lot, and then in reality Bethesda games have been bad. There's really no other way to say it. Um, so, getting super excited around Starfield is a mistake, I would say. See, if I cycle this now and toss this, which is probably too good of a card to toss, and destroy this, then any counter he tries to do on this trap card will only counter his card being destroyed. Which doesn't counter that being destroyed. Which leaves me in a pretty good position now to just damage him. And he's already wasted half of his life. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is just going to surrender. So almost certainly there is going to be a fuel-based limitation more than like Skyrim, where there were mountains preventing you from going in different directions. But you can see in this video, it really is 90% somebody just talking to Todd Howard, or Todd Howard talking. And Todd Howard, I'm not sure I've seen too many videos of him in the past. But he does look like he's a fairly old man at this point. There might be something new to this dialogue system where it seems like it has different colors and different pluses and minuses. That I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't fairly close to the dialogue systems you would expect to see in a Fallout game, where your perception checks or your speech checks, and it's just telling you like a percentage chance of succeeding at lying or not seducing somebody with charisma or something. There is visually something odd about this video, I have to say. I mean, you still got not even buttoned up shirt Todd Howard here that looks awful. It's not professional at all. But then the entire picture of the office is just white on white on white, and it's so brightly lit, and that's fine and all, but does that make this the good position or place to do an interview when Starfield looks super dark, and your interviewer lady here is almost like trying to be a YouTube influencer, but she's probably too old by far to be that, with a sweatshirt and jeans instead of more of the old school, old-fashioned by now style of an interviewer being somebody in a suit or a proper fancy business attire. Obviously the interviewer probably wouldn't want to be more dressed up than the interviewee, but that, even in this case, is weird. Yeah, this is just not really what you would expect for Starfield, because there's just been, as far as a color palette, nothing in Starfield. You would think they would have staged that a little bit better. But that's a very minor thing to even mention, certainly, and it probably has nothing to do with the way Starfield will actually look. But I think it's worth mentioning. I'm not giving up here. Just because this guy has 1900 attack character and I have nothing doesn't mean I couldn't turn this around in the amount of time. Players can now transfer their Cyberpunk 2077 saves from Stadia to other platforms. CD Projekt has detailed the save transfer process ahead of Stadia's shutdown. Here's also kind of like a great thematic point here. It would be very weird in Cyberpunk, a game where there's a whole bunch of neon and a whole bunch of dimly lit barred areas. It'd be very weird to have a bright looking... I don't know if this spell card's going to do anything for me. Yep. But yeah, it would be weird to have an interview around a bunch of bright looking things like that. I guess you take this and then that's a 19 on 19 and that stops the bleed. No, it's a 20 on 19. He's potentially screwed me, but maybe not. Yeah, I can't attack. Right. So let's activate this then. The hope would be to be able to send this to activate that ability, to then send this to activate that ability. I tried to watch more of that Cyberpunk 2077 Edge Runners cartoon, and I got about 5 minutes into it, and then something about my Wi-Fi messed up, and I got distracted at that point. There is, like, I've updated the firmware, and there's some new setting that has bit rotted or corrupted or something, where it's showing completely different problems now of internet streams just kind of breaking. Just kind of like, oh, we ran into an error. That's that. And it very possibly has to do with maybe the QoS settings or just some changed version of the software. But yeah, that's weird, and I haven't seen it in a couple days, so maybe it fixed itself. And at this point, if it was something wrong with my internet service provider, I'm not sure I would need to do that. That is a big risk too, is I'm gonna have to be particularly careful around both my internet service provider hookup and my old internet service provider hookup. Because on two different sides of my house, I have very shallowly buried very, very shallowly buried fiber optic and cable internet connections. Right. I'm getting a little greedy here, playing this way, but if this works, everything should be great. And it didn't. I could have very possibly won there. This definitely is a situation where they have severely limited your options. So you're going to have to find a different kind of strategy to play to win. I will say though, the amount of people in Cyberpunk Edge Runners and that it seemed to be just doing inappropriate actions in front of random strangers by modern standards is was a little high for 1.1% of an episode that I've seen. It does seem like it's a little too edgy, and a lot of it definitely comes down to this like insanely free sex concept that cyberpunk seems to embrace to the point of just it being ridiculous. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a society where actually procreating or masturbating in public would have ever been anywhere close to being acceptable. There's a big difference between, say, like the Japanese baths and or just Japanese people in general, Japanese women being topless, and straight up intercourse being done in public. Exhibitionism, I just don't think naturally occurs to the human brain in enough people for an entire society to be into that as much as it seems like cyberpunk seems to claim it would be in this world. It's like a post-shame society concept where it's all about flaunting everything. And while that may be a cautionary tale, it's not done in a logical way. And that was criticism that happened in Cyberpunk, for the Cyberpunk 2077 game also, is that there was just a lot of sex bots, a lot of dildos, a lot of just ridiculous things to be ridiculous. Something that would make a edgy teenager laugh or think, oh, this is ridiculous. But breaks believability, certainly. It's much in the kin of something like Ogloff, which is an adult comic that puts out a comic every Sunday, and it is a long-running web comic series around sex comedy jokes almost exclusively, although there's an occasional different kind of joke in there. 98% of them are sex related, and in the universe of Ogloff, yes, it is all about sex all the time, but it is drawn in this farcical, ridiculous way, and the characters are farcical and ridiculous, that the jokes make sense. Also, it's a comic that's only like 8 panels long usually, so it's not trying to establish a believable, realistic world. And it's also set in a fantasy world, not a sci-fi world, if that makes any difference, but it probably doesn't. Whereas I think Cyberpunk 2077 on some level wants to be presented as being serious, while presenting what can only be described as something that is not really serious as a concept. And that's the weirdest part about Cyberpunk 2077's settings, is that's the only thing I really even know about the story, having not played the game. Like, yes, I get the general idea that it would be a sci-fi world with a lot of cyberpunk type imagery and robotics and augmentations. So it might have something somewhat in the style of something like Deus Ex, but that's all I could really tell you. Now, in all fairness, I can't tell you too much about Deus Ex 1 either, because I haven't played it, but I do know it has something to do with secret societies and corporate espionage and plots, and Deus Ex Mankind Divided, or Human Revolution. Human Revolution was the one game I was playing, and you definitely know that I know the story around that. A world where poor people often have to get augmented to be able to work and become cyborgs, and then they get addicted to an anti-rejection drug, so they are forever indebted into these anti-rejection drugs and augmenting themselves more and more. And while the rich may fashionably augment themselves every now and then, overall the human augmentations are not creating a better world, and they're not making life better for most people. And then there's a bigger conspiracy that you eventually find out in Human Revolution. Okay. I am desperately trying to get this to actually work. Add this to the hand. Activate this effect. Toss this card. Activate this. And then just toss this one because that's the best we can do. Now we toss these 4 cards. Get one of these, put it there. Activate this effect. Do this. Go ahead and kill this guy. And let's see what happens. What can we special summon? I don't think either one of those would be helpful, so we'll say no to that. Let's try to focus a little bit more on the video game news, because, yeah, I think what's going to happen here is I'm going to run out of steam fairly quickly on playing this. This is not going well so far. Like, you really do need just a victory straight out of the gate, and these kinds of festivals probably should have a tutorial set up, something that would let you engage and get a victory early. This will bring number 2, so if this activates one of their 2 abilities, activate that too, why not? Activate that also, why not? So, in this case, I'm going to send that to the graveyard. Then I'm going to add that to the hand. Banish that card. Video Games Chronicle says the PlayStation 5 is in joint 4th place for the fastest console to hit 2 million sales in the UK, which sounds like a fairly contrived list, to say the least. Alright, so he surrendered, which lets us go up rank 1. Can we fall down any ranks? I don't know. Like, if you couldn't fall down in a rank, then that's something. These are duels where you fight to improve your rank with a different forbidden list to standard decks. That almost reads like the limitations would change based on what rank you're on. That's not really the case. Well, I guess I started at Bronze 4, so at least I didn't go to Rookie. Which does kind of make it seem like I had already won this, or that it's just giving me this. Yeah. And this does seem like this is just a challenge that's going to come over and over again and just keep on coming back. And then you could get a new Link Master frame and Link Master title. Otherwise, you're just getting 50 gems for doing each of these. A card back if we can get to Platinum. So I don't know if there's even really a great reason to engage with this. This might very well be a festival not worth engaging with. Konami has just announced plans to launch a platform for trading in-game NFTs, which, yeah, even though I may be mostly enjoying Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters, and it's a Konami game, we still have to really expect Konami to be Konami and effectively awful as a company. The EA of Japan, or EA is the Konami of the West, in the West. I'm still very much hating the fact that they've created Web3 to imply that the phrase Web3 now just means NFTs and metaverse and nonsense buzzwords. It's not even really news at this point to talk about NFTs or metaverse or Web3 or any of that stuff, because it's just ridiculous nonsense that's not going to go anywhere. Most recent incidents to prove that is just the desperate push of Meta, Facebook, to push its VR metaverse, announcing the characters now have legs, as if that's a big improvement or something that deserves an announcement. Yeah, inherently, when you are a fair weather news watcher around some product and you're just not really invested in paying attention to it, like the Facebook VR stuff, and you just are naturally getting a knee-jerk reaction of you not liking anything that's being said about it, you know that their advertisement, their promotion has failed miserably. And if you already have negative vibes around your product that hasn't even come out yet, you've really lost the plot, lost the narrative. And I've never really seen anybody just say, hey, let's hold back, let's rethink this, let's not launch and rebrand, relaunch later under a different concept so much. But usually that's probably because they're too invested, or their promotional companies or the PR companies are telling them that it's working perfectly and lying to them. I guess the best example of a video game company going the wrong direction, and still really going in the wrong direction, but boiling the frog in such a way that people didn't notice, is the Xbox series and always online DRM. When they announced it and phrased it like it was going to require the Xbox Series 1 to always require an internet connection, there was a huge amount of pushback. There was always online DRM fights and complaints all over the place. But for the most part, Microsoft has still implemented everything they wanted to implement, either through the Game Pass, which at some point they will just stop putting out physical discs, and they are just trying to get the percentage of people that are buying physical discs to go down lower and lower over a generation. And once the number of people, once there's only 30% of their player base is buying physical discs, they probably will stop releasing games physically, and then it will all be Game Pass, and by the factor that it is all going to be Game Pass, it will have always online DRM. Just that simply. Right, well, let's see if we can do something here with this. We only got 2. But if I bring out this guy here, and then I activate his effect, I can special summon this. Maybe I should have put that in the corner there. Let's see what this does. This is a new card for me, so probably a mistake. Okay. I could get a 4 on the field, but I don't think I actually need to. I think if we do this, this is just too slow though. And that's not my mouse cursor that's too slow. Although, I kind of do wish I could maybe learn to nudge it up. The problem with speeding it up too much is that when you start to get to clicking the minimize or the maximize versus the X button. But no, this is just the game moving too slow, or the opponent moving too slow. Leaked Project U video offers the first glimpses of Ubisoft's new co-op shooter, which I assume that this art looks nothing like it, and Video Games Chronicle still giving you ridiculously unconnected videos. They really, I think, are pushing the idea of their YouTube channel more than anything else now. I'm just trying to become a YouTube channel. I did try to use that stabilized diffusion a second time for a different concept, and yeah, it just kind of is a language nobody speaks at the moment, is the problem. There probably is a way where I could find 40 or 50 words in a row that would get a consistent series of photos, which is what I need to look very similar to each other, like they're coming from the same artist. But if you're doing just 12 words as a short description, it's just too random to get a series of pictures. It might be good enough to get you started, certainly. I definitely could see, if you're a non-artist, going to the stabilized diffusion online and saying, here's the general concept of what I want in 12 words, starting with that, and then being able to, in Photoshop, draw some lines and say, I like this, not this, and then give that to a real artist to actually animate and follow instructions. But it feels like to me, it feels like it's miles and miles away from being something that the average human could use to create actual finished photo products. Even in their examples, you really are seeing that there aren't. I'm not seeing a lot of examples of people doing a great job. There's like a Reddit subreddit that I probably should start following, where people are posting a stabilized AI images, and a lot of it is people putting in their own seed images to start with, often photos of themselves, and trying over and over and over again. So they're spending as much time, if not more, than an artist would spend working from scratch to get it to do what they want it to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's particularly good at doing a stylized art image based on a photo of a human face, and particularly bad at anything much more creative than that. So yeah, it's a shame it doesn't work perfectly out of the box, but it is exciting that at some point in the future there might just be a Photoshop plugin or GIMP plugin that says type in these words and this will get you a general idea of where to go, or draw a picture very briefly, draw a rough sketch, and then we can use that as our source. The nominees for the first ever Scottish Game Awards have been announced. The event will take place later this month, according to Video Games Chronicles. I imagine these nominees aren't going to be too weird. Actually, under art and animation, there's a lot of games here I don't recognize. And this has been a weird year as far as games coming out in general, but I almost wonder if this is actively trying to only highlight things that have been made by Scottish people or in Scotland. Because that seems very weird. Like this Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot, The First Cases, is about the most recognizable game I've seen so far. And then when you see best educational programs, all of these seem to be very much inside of Scotland. And oddly, they're giving best educator awards, which seems weird. Like, for any bigger awards service to give away best educator, they'd have to have a lot of applications from a lot of people around the world for that to make sense. And there might be a logical idea around that, though, to highlight educators in the field of teaching programming in video games, because that might help grow and improve video game educating and programming, because I don't think it is really as good as it should be. I think it's fairly hit and miss. And schooling in general at any level shouldn't be flip a coin, and if you're lucky you'll get a good teacher, and if you're unlucky you'll get somebody who's actually a bad teacher and going to either not teach you or teach you the wrong things or wrong ways to do things. Best large budget games again has a list of games I just don't recognize. Diversity Champions sounds like best SJW. Lifetime Achievement Awards for names I don't recognize. Community Spirit Stuart Gilray Award. Seems weird. Again, don't recognize these games. And then Tools and Technology. And then, let's see, the judges is a technical director from Bethesda Game Studios, a journalist from Games Radar Plus, or a feature writer, not even really a journalist, a director of the Glasgow City Innovation District, so that makes me wonder if these judges are getting like free penthouse suites at some hotel. Although I don't know where this event is getting its funds in general, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is being funded by taxpayer dollars, and that this is just a great taxpayer ripoff. There's the COO of Scottish Edge. I've never heard of that. There is video games editor for The Guardian, which I don't know if anybody's would be happy about that. Alright, how many do we have here? 2. So you set that, and then you do nothing more. Then there's Jim Trinka, who's a game journalist and video producer. Never heard of them. And then there's Joe Twist, who is the CEO of UT. So yeah, this is a whole lot of nobodies, and a significant amount of them not really being in the video game industry, either being video game journalists, which aren't in the industry really of making games, or being the Glasgow City Innovative Director of Glasgow City Innovation District. Yeah, and even here they say made in Scotland, so it's very, very Scottish. It's not considering anything that isn't Scottish. So it's really, as an awards event, not going to, I think, appeal to many people, even people outside of Scotland but nearby, such as England, are probably not very interested in the Scottish Game Awards and are much more focused on the BAFTA adding video games as a category and giving awards. Noticeably also, BAFTA has been around for a long time, so BAFTA adding a category of video games has more prestige than a brand new out of the gate Scottish Game Awards will. In the same way that if the Oscars or the Emmys decide to have a video game category, or 2 or 3 or 4, that would have a little bit more clout, even if they don't really deserve it, than the video game awards that we have already. But yeah, I would think at the very least on your first year you would have an attempt to at least have a Game of the Year category that includes all games everywhere, and say this come from more of the perspective of this is how we in Scotland feel the best Game of the Year was, instead of saying here are games made in Scotland and those are the only ones we're going to consider. And it is very odd that there's just so many of these categories that are giving awards to people. Now, arguably, the rest of the world's video game awards events probably should give a lifetime achievement or award to one person every year, one individual, but it'd be very hard to give any other kinds of awards legitimately to people, since game development very much is a group field activity. It's a group activity, so trying to single out a single person doesn't make a lot of sense. You may have like the best independent or one-man project. I could see having something like that where you gave an award for a game made by only one person, but even that is pretty nebulous and unrealistic. You could have a situation where beacon of the community type of award where you have other game developers nominate their peers, but at a certain point that is just a popularity award. Let's see. Let's actually play here. I think this is very possibly the last game I'm going to play today, though. It's just too slow. And this definitely feels like a Sleepy Friday, for lack of a better term. I'm kind of half asleep, but I'm not really yawning or anything. Right. Ah, darn it. Well, I'll just half the attack. If I was smarter, that wouldn't have gone down like that. This is just not going well. Just Kariboing me. Is that really what this should be? Is that you should be playing a Karibo deck? Like, it definitely feels like because there's limitations on the cards you can play, then you just have to play crazier combinations to make up for that while you're playing more cards. Well, ideally, I'd like to find a deck where I can just play one card and it works, and I don't have to synergize, special summon, play a spell. I mean, I'm fine with a 5-card combination winning the whole game, but if I'm having to play a 5-card combination just to get a 30,000 attack monster to stay on the field, that seems like a lot. Video Games Chronicle says Blizzard is investigating Overwatch 2 bug that was shutting down PCs on top of the auto purchase bug that they're refusing to give refunds for, which I think I need to mention. Overwatch 2 has been incredibly bad. And there's not a great recourse towards auto purchase bugs, because you could dispute the charges and then all your Blizzard Battle.net accounts will probably be blocked forever and deleted, and so you're going to be punished because of their bug and their refusal to make good. You could threaten a class action suit there, and that's really why they should be refunding anybody who asks for a refund, because there's definitely grounds for a class action suit of manipulating or charging the credit card inaccurately, refusing to give refunds, and holding hostage accounts if you did go to the bank and dispute the charges. Which that is part of the nasty side and danger of always online digital ownership of digital property, is that there's just so many extra avenues in which somebody can rob you, and there's just no other way to describe it. Moving on, FIFA 23's World Cup mode is leaked and it's playable, I guess, if you're interested in that. God of War Ragnarok's PS5 hardware bundles revealed in a next-gen immersion trailer. If you want to watch the trailer, check that out. The Epic Game Store's next free titles have been announced. Fallout 3 and Evoland will replace ToeJam and Earl's Back in the Groove and Darkwood. Which, okay. There is an interesting fact to point out as far as the Epic Game Store free games, is that it used to be you would get only one game per week, and now fairly consistently we're getting 2 games per week. One fairly big game, even if it might be somewhat old, like Fallout 3. Now, is this Fallout 3 Game of the Year edition, or is it just Fallout 3? Because Fallout 3 alone is the worst way to play Fallout 3. Yeah, and I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't play the DLC of Fallout 3 when I first played Fallout 3, because the DLC content is better. It does add something to the whole game, but honestly, I don't think I had the Game Edition of the Year edition when I first played it, so my experience with Fallout 3 ended with the game just saying game over and you not being able to play anymore on the last storyline mission, which also, in my first experience, I did not play half of the map of Fallout 3 because I thought you'd be able to play more, so I rushed towards the ending. And it turns out I missed a lot of stuff, maybe not as much stuff as I may have thought I had missed. It is also, I think, worth mentioning that PC Building Simulator, or yeah, PC Simulator 2, or PC Building Simulator 2, I forget the name of it, is out now, because I saw Linus Tech Tips highlighting that, but it was a sponsored video from the Epic Game Store, so I suspect that the game isn't actually available on Steam. It's just in the turn there. And it does feel like PC Building Simulator 2 is an improvement over PC Building Simulator 1. I'm not sure if there really needed to be a number 2 behind it instead of it just being an update. And so there is a slight question, I guess, as to whether they have fulfilled the ambition of it being a good place to potentially sit a kid in front of virtual computers and do a lot of PC building and testing and like applying thermal paste and things like that. And can you potentially have the first half of a PC building class taught to kids at a younger age without risking thousands of dollars of equipment through something like that? Because inherently, when I took my computer classes, it was in high school, when it really probably should have been closer to middle school that the kids were being taught that. and there was just a high risk of computers breaking over and over again, and there was just this need to constantly have very cheap computers and computer components because people were making dumb mistakes like swapping hard drives when it was turned on, touching things and shocking computers while it was plugged in, just not applying thermal paste. In those days when I was in my computer class, overheating computers wasn't the big issue. We definitely didn't have water cooling as a concept, or even custom cases really as a concept. We didn't have modular cables, and so it's pretty easy to bend pins, pretty easy to screw things up. So I could see a lot of bookwork and a lot of PC built simulator 2 getting played in a classroom, in a computer classroom, which honestly I could see spending less focus around building computers because, let's face it, unless you're Chinese, you're probably not going to get a job assembling computer components, and even then, I don't know if there's that many jobs that will exist for the next generation of Chinese people assembling computer components. So I could see spending half of a semester covering the ideas of building a computer as just a side note around programming, of which there would be more of a focus there. And when you look at like the stemma stuff, there's a lot of projects and ideas that are very much just like learn the basic concepts of electronics just because everybody should know electronics, that they don't have an applicable level of usefulness in the real world, unless you happen to be a stemma teacher or become a stemma teacher or a inventor or something. Like you're really not going to build little robot toys as a career. And that's what it mostly is. All most of the stemma stuff is just build a little robot toy. Right. Not that one. Not that one, not that one, that one. And I guess we'll send one of these also to the graveyard. And cut your half in attack. Cut your half in attack. Or cut your attack in half, if I can speak correctly. Let's see. Marvel Spider-Man's Miles Morales hits PC in mid-November. PC specs and features trailer has been released. So the Miles Morales Spider-Man is a sequel of sorts to the other Spider-Man game, which I think is already on PC. If not, it's about to be. About to be on PC. This guy is doing a lot. And at this point, I don't think there is anything else to do. Let's see. Sega has delayed Humankind's console release indefinitely. The publisher says the delay is due to unique challenges and is offering refunds. Did Humankind ever come out on PC I don't remember this game. It definitely seems like it is a Age of Empire, SimCity type game where you go through many ages. There's a better game to compare it to, but I forget the name of it. Yeah, it was released on PC in August of 2021, and yeah, I don't... Let's see if we can find it on Steam. Nope. Yeah, I don't have a link to it on Steam. I definitely don't recall there being a lot of talk of yeah, I don't think there was a lot of talk about humankind, so I don't think it blew people out of the water. Let's see, Disney's Dreamlight Valley has a Scar update coming next week. This is the first major content update with a new star path. Looking at the picture, here you have your custom adult Disney fan character. And then you have Scar, and then you have Wally, and maybe some Pirates of the Caribbean themed area, and Ursula, and maybe some Jungle Book type themed areas. Which, yeah, I'm still trying to see if there is a great gameplay mechanic to be found in Dreamlight Valley, or if it isn't just all going to be so focused around the fishing minigames and the farming minigames that if you don't find that interesting, there's nothing else to really do. Also, there's definitely a question as to whether the game is going to try to become very microtransaction-y in one way or the other, and that you're virtually potentially paying for a trip to Disneyland or Disney World instead of actually going to Disneyland or Disney World in the real world, which Disneyland in California did just jack up the prices per day by I think about $40 a ticket, so it's like $120, $160 per person per day in Disneyland, and Disneyland's not that big in the first place. Almost certainly you would think some of that probably has to do with the fact that Hurricane Ian and the other hurricanes that are soon to come in Florida have reduced the number of people going to Disney World in Florida, so they're trying to make up money that way, but they can also be easily just described as being greedy. That would also feel very realistic. Apparently, a watchmaker called Tag Heuer, who I've never even heard of, is selling $25,000 and $4,300 Mario Kart watches, limited to 250 $25,000 watches and $3,000, $4,000, and $300 watches. And as far as I can tell, the only thing that's different about them is it says Mario Kart here. Looking at these pictures, there's a little Mario here, and maybe a little star and a racetrack here. Not a lot of difference. There seems to be maybe a little Mario here and a blue shell here on this one. I couldn't even tell you which one's the $25,000 versus the $4,000 watch. They look exactly the same to me in quality and value. which really highlights how watches are, there's a little bullet on it too. Watches are often incredibly overpriced and ridiculous. Apparently a Plague Tale Requiem spoilers are appearing online ahead of next week's release, so be careful. Apparently Toad has a song in the Mario movie. Voice actor confirms following the musical claims. This guy just found a way to defeat me. And we really are not getting anywhere with this. Not only are we not getting anywhere as far as winning, we're not getting anywhere fast. We did make some progress, I suppose, here, but you can see they really only expect you to win 10 times at most in this. Meanwhile, getting all the spell and trap cards done. Link summoning may be an issue. We may not have a lot of link summon things. And they want you pretty much just to duel only 30 times in this. It really does feel, though, like a great example of how the game flow of a game can change drastically based on what cards you actually allow. The fact that this daily still hasn't quite done it is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, I probably am going to be sitting around doing a lot of nothing over the weekend. I probably should convert that potential nothing into a potential something and play more of this off screen over the weekend. Keegan Michael Key got to improvise a song in Super Mario Brothers, which was an absolute blast, is the subtitle here. Improvising a song. There's only a couple ways I could imagine you can improvise a song. One, it is going to be rap, which that would be a funny gimmick, certainly, to have Toad rap. Or two, it's going to be a improvised song where Toad is trying to make a song up in the middle, off the top of his head, and it's supposed to be awful and bad and silly. Which, yeah, there definitely is seeming confirmation at this point that there are musical elements to the Mario movie. Of course, musical elements doesn't fix everything. Like, if the movie really is like a Trolls movie and it's just song after song after song, that's going to be very weird for a Mario movie because it's just not really expected. It wasn't really expected in the Trolls movies either, and it kind of worked, I think, because Trolls as a toy is really just a doll with no canon that most people would recognize. But yeah, I would think that there needs to be a decent amount of action and platforming and just animation showing action and platforming in a Mario movie, and that's going to need to be a big focus, and it can't just be songs. It can be as many songs, I imagine, as you have in your average Pokemon movie, which is to say that there's usually one breakout hit that's really memorable in a Pokemon movie at most, and then the rest of the songs are either in the background and you're not even really paying attention, or they're just non-existent at all. In a Pokemon movie, you probably will see like training montages or fighting montages where there's background music hyping things up and amping it up. But Mario music, you'd almost expect that it would sound like the kind of music you would hear in a Mario game, which a lot of the Mario music in Mario games is not particularly great as far as amping things up, or not good enough to be in an actual movie. Like you might hear some little audio cues of like the little jingle that plays when you have less than 10 seconds in most Mario games, or Mario Kart jingle at the beginning of a Mario Kart race, or just little musical jingles of hitting a block and getting coins, things like that. You don't really expect it to play the full song in the movie. Let's see. Unlike Overwatch 2, Modern Warfare 2's mobile phone requirement is PC only. Console players aren't subject to the same SMS security policy as PC ones. I wonder if that's a case where, for a while now, for a long time, consoles have probably a specific identifier, a public key of some sort, or a hardware address like a modem's MAC address that games can pull and justify that on that. If that's the case, then yeah, you very well could ban hardware instead of just banning a specific player's console ID. Whereas there probably isn't an easy way to ban hardware on somebody's PC in the same way. But I wouldn't be surprised if actually Xbox games themselves do try to make some kind of unique identifier that might be made available in the future to game developers. So you can't just make a new account. At a certain level, it's worth pointing out that a lot of people have grown up feeling like it was very much fair play to make an account, do something stupid, get banned, and then go make another account. Like, there are definitely people that feel like that is fair play. That's the way it's been allowed to be played this whole time. It's a lot like, say, Olympic cheating or cheating in the biking decathlons or whatever, where just everybody was cheating. Everybody knew everybody was cheating, and that was just the way it went. So while the likes of Overwatch 2 and Modern Warfare are trying to make a better experience for players as much as they're trying to make a better experience for themselves, as far as just not having to police players as much, to some extent you can make an argument that's what they're doing. To change the world is certainly going to be to irritate a lot of what otherwise you would consider legitimate players, with frustrating extra security or a higher instance of your accounts getting banned. Look at Facebook. How many people have had some kind of post taken down on Facebook or marked as being inaccurate or something? That really irritates a lot of people. I have somebody I follow on my personal Facebook that seemingly believes his account was restricted for putting dad jokes up, which seems ridiculous. But yeah, Facebook is almost certainly an example of going too far and being draconian, and at the end of the day, Facebook didn't really succeed in making Facebook a better place for anybody by enforcing the rules that they enforce in the way they enforce them. And there's definitely a high possibility that these mobile phone requirements won't fix the problems they're trying to fix anywhere as much as they hope they will. Moving on, Tower of Fantasy studio Hotta, Hotta, shares new details on the game's Vera expansion. next week's version 2.0 release will be the game's first major free content update. It's a little weird to call it a version 2.0 release when it's the first release, but at that point I think you just don't even use numbers because it speaks of an ambition you just haven't been able to fulfill so far. Assuming the previous version released was version 1.1 or 1.0, I don't even remember this game, so it's really hard to have a reaction of any sorts, and the video doesn't want to load anyways. Let's just play this YouTube video instead. Yeah, I don't even know what the game is. It looks like it's some kind of Mad Max Desert Apocalypse JRPG, if I was to guess. Looks like there might be a lot of gacha things built into it. Little toys. And maybe some aspect of an open world where you maybe interact with other people. It's an anime-inspired post-apocalyptic sci-fi art style. Freeform character development, immersive objects, and exciting combat through thrilling battles and exciting open-world exploration, according to the game's description. Yeah, and at some point this game had to have been out, but it almost feels like it's just a mobile game, and that's very possibly why I don't recognize it. But even like this image here doesn't really match with what I'm seeing on the screenshots. Let's see. Splash Damage's game Outcasters looks set to die with Stadia. Many of the game systems are heavily reliant on Google's soon-to-be closed platform. And that's from Video Games Chronicles. This is the biggest news of today, almost certainly. Valve has registered the trademark of Neon Prime for use in game software. The company's last major release was Half-Life Alyx in 2020, which for Valve is almost yesterday, as far as the concept or joke of Valve time. Now, does Neon Prime mean anything to any of the games that have been that Valve has made up until this point? Is Neon Prime going to be another puzzler, platformer, kind of like Portal, that's set in a different universe, or is it going to be another first-person shooter with physics like Half-Life, set maybe in a different universe? Or maybe it is now going to be, this is the actual reboot of the Half-Life universe after the events of Half-Life Alyx. It could be anything at all. There is a high possibility too that it's not well, I guess it is saying it's a computer game and not a computer engine, but it might be a computer engine because depending on how these categories go, it might be they're getting away from the source engine and instead announcing a Neon Prime engine from the ground up, which would be crazy, but I could see them doing it and just saying, hey, we've been working on the source engine, Source 2, for a very long time, and it's just not really working out, so we decided to make something else at the same time that is an engine. Or it might be some kind of software that's not quite like the source engine, but is also somehow very useful in game development. But yeah, computer game software might include computer programming software for video games, or maybe not. This also could just be Valve trademarking something they have an idea for, though, and that they will never release or finish. It could very well be that Neon Prime is some kind of software that helps you optimize your game for the Steam Deck or something like that, and that would be exciting too, but not as exciting as a new game in a new series outside of the Half-Life universe. Inherently, they just shouldn't have put the Portal game series in the Half-Life universe, and then they could have made more Portal games, and Half-Life Alyx arguably could have not been Half-Life Alyx. It could have just been a game called Alyx set in its own universe. And so there is this desire to keep tying things back to the Half-Life universe, whereas now I would say that's more of an anchor than a balloon as far as how it makes people feel about their products. On the other hand, their one game which they were trying to make, which was the card game, which Neon Prime could be a reiteration on the card game that they were trying to make, that wasn't really set in the Half-Life universe, and that failed miserably, probably for very different reasons, though. Our last article from Video Games Chronicle today says Nintendo has taken Switch Sports offline due to an update bug. The bug was causing the game to close during pre-match loading screens, which that I think once again highlights a problem with Nintendo in that they just aren't as good of programmers as they should be for a company that's over 100 years old. And then that immediately takes us to the Gamatsu articles, PlayStation Classics catalogs, stuff like that. Lineup for October being announced, we already talked about that. The Rumblefish 2 video interview is available on Gamatsu if you want to watch it. Here's two Japanese people with masks sitting next to each other and having an anime figurine in between them. Which, yeah, there has been a significant pivot throughout the world as far as what people think they need to do versus what they don't need to do to prevent COVID, which I think they are still fairly concerned about in Japan. Otherwise, this would just be a weird coincidence where both of them are sick at the same time. Honestly, if you are going to be sitting next to each other, a shield that's just slightly around you isn't likely to really help you. Air can waft fairly around the shield. A sneeze guard makes people safer on the salad bar, feel safer on the salad bar, but that's all that really ever was as far as the dividing. Being 6 feet away, though, I think is fairly accurate and still a good idea. And I'm surprised more people didn't figure out ways to just cut and crop 2 camera angles so it looks like people are sitting next to each other when they aren't. Particularly in Japan, I don't know if the rooms are even 6 feet apart. But yeah, I would say keeping your distance, wearing a mask if you're sick, still feels like good ideas. Or just wearing a mask in general to make people feel good is a good idea. A lot of it is more just making people feel good so they don't throw a fit and start yelling at you, at which point they're screaming and spitting on you even more, or they're physically assaulting you or touching you. And I went on a bit of a rant there and don't even remember what game that was. Moving on, Rune Factory 3 Special launches March 2nd, 2023 in Japan, which, yep, that looks like a big limited edition collection. There still is a fairly big difference in what you get in these limited editions based on whether or not it's more of an anime style game versus a Western 3D model style game. The Japanese focused audience tends to always get CDs because I think CDs are still a big thing in Japan, and they tend to get pencil boards or posters. This almost looks like stand-up characters made out of cardboard that have been custom cut around the frame. which that's kind of unique. The game tends to be included in a Japanese release, where a lot of Western releases are not including the game. Either way, though, regardless of the audience, almost all of these limited editions are too expensive and they aren't really giving you anything worth it. The Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sin version 1.10 update is now available, and it adds 2 new playable characters. Which, okay. Screenshots still zoomed in. I wish I could figure out a way to fix looking at these screenshots in a timely manner. Of course, I could click this and go into full screen mode to see an image, and then I could zoom just because the image is so big, but that's too slow and that would just open a bunch of tabs. Star Ocean Divine Force character trailers for Morelli L. Kennedy and Malkaya Trathan. If you want to check out those trailers on Gamatsu. Samurai Maiden has the opening movie featuring a theme song of Divine Tuning. Yep. There pretty much has never been a situation where a Western game has actively highlighted a unique theme song in their trailer, or had a unique theme song that they were even trying to have the general populace recognize exists, which that once again highlights how music and CDs are still a big thing. Soundtracks towards games are still a big thing in more Asian Japanese game releases than they are in Western game releases. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there hasn't been a AAA game that released a soundtrack in at least 5 years. Samurai Maiden is this Onichambara game clone where you're Japanese schoolgirl, maybe in the past, fighting a bunch of zombie-like creatures with a big sword, and on top of that there is a relationship harem aspect to it of these other anime girl characters, in which you're at the very least flirting with them, if not straight up making out with them. I think for some power-up reasons. And look, there's even a male character. Yep. Game is fairly heavily selling itself on that one scene, which very possibly happens once in the game, whereas the vast majority of your gameplay is going to be a lot of hack and slash stuff, and that can be good or it can be bad. It's just going to come down to how much it really plays and how well it plays, and in general just how much game there actually is around that, where it could be a lot of gameplay, or it could be like 2 or 3 hours of gameplay. The hack and slash action RPG Undecember is now available worldwide. That being said, I think this was the game we saw on Steam and was already mostly negative. And this is from Line Games as far as the publisher, which Line is the Japanese equivalent to Facebook, does other things too. But yeah, if I'm recalling correctly, here we have the game on Steam. It is 38% positive of 3,464 reviews. And yeah, in the last 30 days. And this is the first game ever to be put on Steam as by Line Games as a published product. Let's see. But yeah, as a free-to-play game with third-party DRM and third-party account requirements, there's just a lot of things that people are not liking. It's a cash grab, I assume is what that's supposed to be, and it's a mobile game for PC. Installs in Protect but doesn't remove it after uninstall. So this is a huge failure for Line Games trying to potentially move into PC gaming, and arguably Line Games trying to move into PC gaming should have been a success. It would have been nice if it was a success, because that would push a lot of Japanese players towards PC gaming, which it seems like there is a element or a push towards that, where PC gaming seems to be getting more popular in Japan. The PlayStation Japan One Room Playground lineup video is available. I'm not sure what that's actually advertising though. It introduces 21 PlayStation 4 and 5 titles to a music video actor Karen Masaki, with music by Puni Puni Dinki or Denkai in collaboration with the PC Musical Club. So basically this is a commercial of a Let's Play set to music. That is an odd way to go, certainly. That was Final Fantasy 16, which I think is the online Final Fantasy. Is this all still Final Fantasy 16? No, this is God of War Ragnarok now. I can't help but think that maybe this is either Sony of Japan trying something very different, or this is a case of Sony of California somehow being in charge of how things are announced in Japan. And the fact that God of War Ragnarok is being pushed before One Piece, I think probably highlights that. But maybe all these people are just paying for order. Because certainly the Japanese audience is going to have more recognizable or more interest around a One Piece game than God of War Ragnarok, by a little bit at least. But yeah, this really is just a collection of advertisements and trailers with music playing in the background and a Japanese celebrity. And yeah, I'd be very interested to find out if this was a commercial that the Sony of Japan team made, or if this was a commercial that Sony of California people made. There is definitely an argument, though, that this is the Sony of California people. And where that comes from is I have never seen a kind of couch set up with a kitchen bar and that looks like a stand-up refrigerator in the background. Like, this does not feel like a recognizable Japanese apartment or area. It's got way too much square footage, way too much furniture. Sure, if you were a millionaire, you could have a house in Japan like this, and you really didn't even have to be a millionaire. But your average Japanese person is just not going to have a couch and a room for a bar behind it, and they're just not going to have a 18 cubic feet of a refrigerator. They're going to have tiny little refrigerators, if they have refrigerators much at all. And see, this really is just way too much of an environment to relate to a Japanese person, because that's just not the experience. And in a lot of ways, that's been the problem with PC gaming in general in Japan, is that PCs have been too big and for the amount of square footage. They're really not too expensive for an electronic gadget, but they've just been too big. They haven't fit on shelves that are designed, mostly Japanese shelves are designed to hold like light novels and manga books in particular are really, really short. That's why even the consoles these days are too big. The PlayStations in the past have been specifically designed to be a certain size to fit on Japanese shelves. I don't know if this hairstyle is the natural hairstyle of this lady or what, but that seems like an odd hairstyle. Yeah, it's almost like they just threw a dartboard and said, we need to advertise to the Japanese. What are the Japanese like? Well, they like animated things, so let's have a 3D CGI character. They like VTubers, so let's make them a VTuber that's singing. They like karaoke, so let's have them singing. And they like J-pop music, so let's have what I assume is J-pop music. They also like bright neon colorful things. It's just like every little stereotype in the world that you could think of. So I would lean towards thinking that this was a commercial made in the West for the East, as it were. Moving on, because that is just a theory. A game called Maizen Tantai: The Protea Cases for PS4 is now available in Japan. The Switch version was released on July 28th. This looks like a visual novel. They're calling it a romantic mystery adventure game, but then later down here it is tagged as a visual novel. Yep. Okay. So we probably at this point are either at the end of Golden Week or at the end of the week after Golden Week. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a little bit more news from Gamatsu back in Japan, and a little bit more Japanese games getting announced and coming out. There's a little bit of time until Black Friday. I don't know if Black Friday is as big of a deal, but end of the year sales are still a big deal in Japan. So, yeah, working towards Black Friday and Christmas, I imagine we'll see a little bit of an increase as far as Japanese games coming out and Japanese announcements coming out. A game called The First Descendant has a story trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. I'm not getting super hyped by this image. It's a little dull in the background, and the color palette in the uniforms, outfits are kind of dull. Famitsu has its updated sales for October 3rd through October 9th. Let's see, Nier Automata, the End of Yorha edition for Switch, taking the second spot. First PlayStation 4 game is in the 7th spot. This Japanese game taking the 9th spot. And let's see, then PlayStation 4 game Valkyrie Elysium in the 14th spot. I'm starting to see more PlayStation 4 games show up in the top 20 spots, but it is still 80% at least Nintendo Switch. Consistently on a weekly basis, the Nintendo Switch is selling 50,000 plus units between the original Switch and the OLED model. PlayStation 5 is not selling even 5,000, so it's a factor of 10 difference. And then the Switch Lite made the 4th spot this week. The digital edition for the PlayStation 5 is not selling very well. And the Xbox Series S and X didn't sell very well, although interestingly, this week the Series S outsold the Series X, when usually it's been fairly consistent the other way around. They seem to very much want the top tier consoles, if they are buying a top tier console, regardless of whether that's a Switch, a Series X, or a PlayStation 5. PlayStation 4, again, only sold like 12 units, which that's a ridiculously small number. Let's see. Now, I am hyped about Bayonetta 3, so Bayonetta 3, Bayonetta's everywhere, and overview trailers and screenshots. Here we have what I suspect is Bayonetta in a either different skin, or this is a disguise that she wears at the very beginning of the game, just as a joke twist. It's like, wouldn't it be funny if she did look like this? But you can see her Umbrian necklace, and it seems almost like she has shields on her arms too, and then you have like a flying magical fish in the background. Video's age restricted. Well, then let's just watch the Japanese one instead of the English one. What? I mean, certainly this points out the inconsistency that exists here, even on how videos get put up by Platinum Games, as to whether they feel like they need to age restrict the English version, but the Japanese version, which is exactly the same, almost certainly doesn't have to be age restricted, because they know for a fact that Japanese people are slightly more mature. Yeah, Bayonetta there, if that really was her, seems to have just died, and this seems to be in the future. So my theory that the character that I think is called Violet is Bayonetta's daughter from the future, and she's going to go back in the past to potentially train herself and be a better fighter in the future. That might be, there might be more of a twist to it than that. But you can see that there's definitely an older version of who I assume is the father character and Bayonetta as a character. And she is becoming this kind of mother character. Which they basically hinted at that thought. Even in the first game. So to 3 games around, finally get to that point is a decent amount of foreshadowing in an industry like video games, where there really isn't a lot of foreshadowing. I'd be a little disappointed, though, if it turned out that she wasn't actually connected in any way to Bayonetta, and she didn't think of her as either at least an adopted daughter, if nothing else. Yeah, it definitely feels like that's a different skin. They may have decided in Bayonetta 3 to go with some sillier skins that aren't Nintendo exclusives, because while the Nintendo exclusive skins worked fine in Bayonetta 2 if you were on the Switch, those are skins that would then just be removed / censored out for PC. And that's kind of the weirdness of capitalism affecting art, in both the creation of Nintendo exclusive skins in the first place, and then the elimination of Nintendo exclusive skins on other platforms. They are showing a trailer with the modesty mode on again, where she always has a certain amount of clothes on, even though her clothes are supposed to be her magical hair strands that get used to summon demons and become more scantily clad. Yeah, I imagine if I was listening to the audio of this, I'd be getting spoiled quite a bit. But visually, I don't think I'm getting spoiled too much. There is a problem, certainly, in what they're showing, though, is that it's all stuff that I've kind of seen before. I'm not seeing a lot of new stuff, and as such, I can't be any more hyped than I already am, which is fairly high hyped. And I can't really personally be that hyped anyways because I haven't played Bayonetta 2, which that's something I should do. Definitely is just get Bayonetta 2 on Steam if it is available on Steam, which I don't think it is, or get it on Switch. But the smart move certainly is to just wait until Bayonetta 3 has been announced for PC and it actually comes to PC. Moving on, Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End and the Secret Key details new characters. So, several new characters in the Atelier Ryza series, or the Atelier series in general. Let's see. Reflector Entertainment is going to develop an existing Bandai Namco intellectual property. Unknown 9 Awakening Studio has been added to a new production line also. So, in a lot of ways, that's pretty useless information. Like, we really don't know what game they're working on, and we have no guarantee that whatever they're working on will actually ever get released. But I suppose it's technically news. We already talked about Miles Morales for PC launching November 18th, so we don't need to go any further there. Still going through the Gametsu articles, but we only have about 5 more. Sonic Frontiers has a combat and upgrades trailer, if you want to check that out. A game company called Z-Boyd Games has announced a Shakespearean magical girls RPG called This Way Madness Lies. And what's interesting here is this definitely would be kind of a bad art style that I would definitely attribute more towards a Western game developer. And yet, Gametsu is the one reporting on this, making me think that this actually is a Eastern game developer. But that art style does not look good, does not look appealing. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Like, you have Sailor Moon, which is obviously your influence that you're gonna take to some level as far as magical girls. And then you're adding Shakespearean stuff for what reason? Like, you could just steal Shakespeare's general themes and stories without inherently making it a Shakespearean game. You have one dark-skinned character and then a blonde and kind of a redhead and kind of a brunette, black hair on the dark-skinned character. But when you're zoomed out, you're just seeing these little RPG Maker chibi characters. Yeah. I don't quite see a reason to go this way when trying to make a game, other than they just had no ideas, and so they said, well, let's just throw a dart at a list of words, and they landed on magical girls and Shakespeare. It definitely feels like it's kind of the idea of a game that you would think up if you were high or drunk, and then you just wouldn't have enough intelligence to realize that that was a high idea or a drunk idea, and as such it really doesn't work. Yeah, I've never heard of this Z-Boy Digital Entertainment. It's also an English only game, so if it was really a Japanese or Eastern developer, you would assume that there would be some other languages. The plot thickens a little bit here, in that Z-Boyd Entertainment is the maker of Cthulhu Saves Christmas, but not Cthulhu Saves the World. I know one of those games got way more popular than it probably deserved to, probably because of like Game Grumps or somebody streaming it. There definitely was a lot of meme games around Lovecraftian and Cthulhu games. But obviously their first game is a meme game, and it seems like their second game is probably a meme game also. I don't think there's much more that needs to be said around that. Space for the Unbound, Chorus Worldwide, becomes the global publisher for the console versions. Which, okay. Which, that's kind of an announcement of the publisher for a game that's not got a release date apparently yet. That's the kind of pointless industry inside or inside baseball announcement that most people don't need to see, though. Like, one publisher versus another publisher means practically nothing to almost every game player out there. I could be a little concerned, I suppose, if like Gearbox Publishing was in charge of publishing something, or Frogwares or Starbreeze, because I don't have a lot of faith in those publishers, and I recognize that. But any other name mentioned, I wouldn't even have a clue as to whether they've published anything else or whether they were good at publishing anything else. A good publisher goes unnoticed effectively, so even if a publisher did a great job, you really, as at the end user, wouldn't know. Moving on, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet trailer details and screenshots are now available. There seems to be some level of interest on this new anime character that they've shown off. She seems to be the wildest looking character in a while that we've seen for Scarlet and Violet in a world full of a lot of boring and dull looking characters. So it's no surprise that there's some level of interest there, but that alone won't really change the quality of the Pokemon games. Yep. I'd like for this new Scarlet and Violet to really succeed, because it's the first time they're getting away from like the turn-based fighting aspect, which really does need to go. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is just an average success, and that there just isn't enough room or enthusiasm for a new Pokemon game because they put out too many Pokemon games in a row. Apparently, Ollie World has an expansion called Finding the Flow Zone, launching November 2nd. And part of Ollie World is skateboarding, if not most of it skateboarding. It looks like almost all of it is skateboarding. I must be thinking of a different game where it was just partially skateboarding. Okay. Well, that looks like more skateboarding, so it's probably what people are looking for. Let's start going through games on Steam. It's not lost on me that a lot of these games are not getting talked about, and then the emphasis or the talking about adult games has shifted perhaps my focus somewhat. Like, so if there are people out there that don't like the coverage of the adult games, which there almost certainly are, but they liked everything else I was doing, then I don't know how to really solve that or try to do a better job around that. Like, ideally you would want to be fairly fair to all of the games, but there's just not a lot to say about a lot of games here. Like, this one's kind of an interesting example because this is a game that has a little bit of gameplay, but it also is mostly a story and visual novel, and the animation and the screenshots that are showing me, tells me that there really isn't enough here. And so I can bend over backwards to potentially try and criticize every game. And I could say, like, Cloaks and Capes is a low effort name. It's not terrible, but it's not the greatest or most creative game. But then the art is just a little rough. Let's see. This looks like it's nothing but a bunch of pictures. Just a bunch of trying to trick you into thinking there's a game there. Like, ideally there might be a way to, if I had more time, which that's always the problem, is I just don't have enough time. There probably should be a split between adult games, talking about those very much at the end of the stream, where nobody gets to the end of the stream anyways. I really am just doing 3 different things at the same time now, particularly with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It's not so much jumping between the news and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! As much as it is just playing a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then doing the news and then looking at games that came out on Steam. So there's some logic to breaking things up, but then there's also some logic to potentially just having what would be 3 or 4 standalone streams. Yeah. There's got to be a better way. I often have that feeling that there's got to be a better way to try and catch more people's attention. I think it's also only slightly selfish to point out that very few people, I think, have ever even heard the ending of my videos in the wrap-up, and they ask for people to subscribe, and that's probably why I don't have a bunch of subscribers. It's because I'm not being the obnoxious person that's putting in a self-promoting advertisement at the beginning of the videos. And plus, these streams are super long, so it's not just a question of people staying through for 30 minutes. It's, did you stay through for 3.5 hours to get to the end? So if I was to put the adult content at the very end, I'm also knowing at that point that I'm at some level censoring myself by going out of my way to put the adult content where it's less likely to be seen. Nickelodeon Kart Racing. That'll get a follow just because of the name recognition. Oh, I suppose it is worth mentioning that with all of the mergers, acquisitions, and just restructuring around Warner Brothers, they shut down, I think, best I can figure that I heard is that they shut down Cartoon Network's animation studio and merged it with Warner Brothers Animation Studio. It doesn't on paper make a lot of sense to have both Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers Animation Studios at the same time. Nickelodeon is not involved, but they will definitely probably benefit from people being laid off and the offices being merged. Inherently, though, it is worth pointing out still that Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, as far as their animation studios, do a very different thing that I don't think is particularly good. In the kinds of cartoons they animate, in the amount of animation they even create at a time, in their target audiences, and in their general focus. This Amazing Machines is coming soon, otherwise I would put it on the follow. There's an old game called The Incredible Machine that I'd love to cover, and this is basically a ripoff of that looks like it was a mobile game, but needs a release date. Well, oddly, we may be hitting a point here where there aren't that many games, and none of them may be adult content games, whether that is the realistic art style or the anime art style. Which that seems weird because we've been fairly consistently getting at least 2 or 3 realistic art style adult games in every couple of days. The bigger concern certainly should be, though, that we're just not seeing any interesting non-adult games during the past couple of weeks either. Like this Venice 2089 might be something, but it's not amazing. Where is Spider-Man Miles Morales in this mix? Where is God of War Ragnarok? Where is even just a generic hidden object game? Like we used to see a lot of those, and now not so much. Like, see, and that was a great example of the mouse being maybe a little too fast, and yet it feels a little too slow. There doesn't seem like there's an acceleration that's quite right. But then maybe once I change the bottom of this mouse and fix the glide stickers, maybe that'll come back, because I definitely recall this being a lot smoother. You see, if it's too fast and you're just trying to get on a button, it's fairly easy to miss that button. Tiny little buttons. Like ideally, the whole interface should just be zoomed out more, or zoomed up at a higher dots per inch or lower dots per inch, whatever it is, that would make the buttons bigger. I did see a curved 32-inch monitor that's like 4K, and the problem with having a single monitor that's the equivalent of 2 monitors is I really would need it to identify itself as 2 monitors for video games, because I would not want to try and play an ultra widescreen 4K experience. Here we have a Toho game that doesn't look particularly interesting. Alright, so first adult game for today is called Hot Cleopatra, and I guess I do want to just move through this fairly quickly as far as descriptions. We can actually show it. All the screenshots are YouTube family friendly. It's 84 cents, which is a good price. It supports, it says, a lot of languages, but Japanese is way at the bottom. That being said, I wouldn't say that this is too far off the anime style. I would still put it more in the realistic style. Cleopatra is probably a good example of a character that is part of the double standards here. Almost certainly, if I did the historical research, I think we'd find Cleopatra was historically somewhere around 16, 17 years old. I doubt she was much older than that, and yet because of the Cleopatra story really being filtered to the England, UK, Roman times, and just filtered through time through more puritanical views, I'm sure they conveniently forgot about what her age would have been at the time. Same is true for a better example of Mary, mother of Jesus. Like, Mary probably was 14 years old, 13 years old. It wouldn't have been much older than that, and yet that's not talked about, really. As for what this game actually is, it seems like it's just square puzzles, so not much there. The art of the character is fairly off model in a lot of these. Like, you have this, which is the hair and face is a little bit off model there, and then you have a totally different hairstyle which is a little bit off model in the design. So it kind of feels like either you have an artist that's not very consistent with the proportions and design, or is just actively drawing it differently. So yeah, not really a game you'd want to buy, and definitely a game I'd put more in the Western category, or at least the realistic art style category, versus the anime category, which is also to say that there's a little bit of an unfairness there in that things that I'm putting in the anime character as far as games pretty much have to be Japanese girls, or in some way uniquely Japanese in its environments and in its depiction. It would be very hard for me to say something was in the anime art style when it didn't have anything Japanese about it, or Japanesey about it. That could happen. I'm definitely open to the idea of describing the game that way, but I'd almost always call that anime inspired and not really an anime art style. Puny Bob here. No, not good enough. That looks like absolute garbage. A lot of these are just nothing. There's a possibility I'm being a little bit more crueler to non-adult games and dismissing them a little bit faster. This beat 'em up game is free. I'll give that a YouTube short. I need to actually make some YouTube shorts. Like every Friday I need to do it, and at least every other Friday I am forgetting to do it. Pixel Cup Soccer Ultimate Edition. Well, this is very positive and on my fall list. Are we doing fall list cleanup now? No, I just put it on the fall list early. Indoor Lands, all one word. I don't know if indoor and land should all be one word. I'll give it a follow and a short. Arrow Strikers, Fly Around. Doesn't have a release date, so I'm not going to do anything with it yet. Fluffy Smash. Alright, now we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles, which is close to being done. Apparently Bone Lab made $1 million within the first hour of release, becoming MetaQuest's fastest selling title. That being said, Bone Lab is one of maybe 3 games in VR that are actually worth playing. The other couple would probably be some kind of super hot game and something I'll just leave as an extra spot for something I'm not thinking of, like the Beat Saber game probably would be the 3rd game there, and then it would just get harder and harder for me to think of a 4th or 5th game worth mentioning. Let's Build a Zoo publisher explains how player region swapping boosted sales. I don't know how changing the region on your consoles would lead to better sales, and I don't know how you could manipulate an audience to change the regions on their consoles because of that. That seems like a very odd story. Very much a GameDeveloper.com type story that would only be worth reading if you actually are a game developer. A new Xbox program lets developers solicit feedback from disabled players. Xbox's new steps towards making games accessible, including developers getting feedback from players with disabilities, and new guidelines for games with touch-based interfaces. So I will have to assume that this is just some kind of opt-in thing where you toggle something saying I am disabled, or it toggles it if you ever plug in a disability controller. I would assume that's how that's going to work. But maybe that isn't. Maybe there's just the Players with Disability Focus, or PWD, program. It may just be a selection of people with disabilities giving feedback before the game is launched. Which that's not as useful as just being able to toggle a box and say you have a disability and that you're willing to give feedback to developers after the game has already been developed. It's probably a little too late, frankly, to give feedback on a game that's already developed anyways. But they probably do need some more feedback, because some of the stuff that people have done and been applauded for doing is really, really dumb, such as having sign language in cutscenes in which you have a sign language interpreter doing sign language when cutscenes already can have and almost always do have full closed captions. Now, I could see maybe you need a second layer of closed captions that were actual closed captions and describing the events of what's happening on the screen, with like sound effects and potentially just describing everything as if you were a blind person. There really is 3 different tiers of what you want. Most people want subtitles, which are often called closed captions, versus actual closed captions that are supposed to have descriptive text in it telling you what music is playing and what's happening in the background, birds chirping, things like that. And then there is really audio descriptions for the blinds, 3rd tier, that games have never really applied for. But at no point is hiring a sign language interpreter and having a video of somebody sign languaging helpful. The number of people that understand sign language but cannot read English or some other language is very, very low. And the types of people that can understand sign language but can't read are probably also the types of people that don't have the mental ability to play video games at all. So if they can get the right feedback, that'd be great. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this stuff is them doing things and wasting resources on things that nobody needs and nobody wants, and then patting themselves on the back for their own pride. Let's see, moving on. GameDeveloper.com says Take-Two is going to shut down 2 Dots developer Play Dots, which I don't recognize this game, 2 Dots. Looks like it's a cell phone game, doesn't look like it's particularly that interesting. Oh, by the way, my favorite cell phone game of lewd waifus, Destiny Child, has its crossover event going on right now. It's going fine, it's not too bad. They added a bunch of other features that I have to now learn, and so there's a lot of new content and a lot of stuff I need to catch up on it. But I have this biological need, apparently, to talk about Destiny Child every stream, because I'm still playing it. Yep. Although in all fairness, I'm also still playing the Cave Trolls mining game that is incredibly boring, and I'm just popping in every once in a while and then leaving after a minute or two. Moving on, over 2,000 cheaters were banned during the Modern Warfare 2 open beta, which 20,000 cheaters in your open beta seems like a lot, and seems like maybe their definition of cheaters is too high. I really hope we never get to a point where there's some kind of social credit score between game companies, but even at this current moment, if you get banned from one game from the makers of Modern Warfare 2, there's a good chance you're going to get banned from other games from the same developer. But yeah, there is a real risk here of we eventually having a social credit score of some sort that allows corporations to determine people to be cheaters with you having no right to defend yourself or no recourse to get those bans turned around. And then you might end up finding that you can't play a lot of games because your credit score, your social credit score is too low. And inherently, if the video game industry did try to create some kind of social credit score, China would immediately demand that they have access to affect that, and they would start lowering all Chinese people's social credit score down to 0 so they can't play video games at all. Netflix announced a cheaper basic with ads tier that will include ad-free access to games. This was announced a day after a new Disney Plus tier was announced, and it's $1 cheaper. Up to 5 minutes of ads for every hour that you watch. At a certain level, Netflix might be better with ads if the ads are actually pointing you to other Netflix shows. But if these are just commercials and they are getting into the ad sales business, and we're just going to start seeing 5 minutes of Geico commercials in a row, that's going to really suck. And I wouldn't recommend people going to the ad tier if that's what it is. And inherently, that's what it's going to come down to, is the people that don't have Netflix now are very few and far between. So I don't know how many people would be willing to drop down to the ad-free tier and try it out to either sing its praises or complain about it in the first place. I think we're going to get relatively very little feedback on the basic with ad tier and what that feels like, unless of course Netflix starts cracking down on password sharing. And if they start cracking down on password sharing, then I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people do get forced into the ad tier and they don't like it, and they just get mad at Netflix and don't get even the ad tier, or don't stick with the ad tier. Video game wise though, that Netflix doesn't have a lot of effects on video games, even though they do want to be in that industry. Apparently they have a editorial here called Debunk Common Shader Myths in this free October webinar on technical art from GameDeveloper.com. Again, a article that's really an advertisement for a webinar that's only useful to actual game developers. And we already talked about Reflector Entertainment developing a project based on an existing Bandai Namco property. Okay. So now we have, is this a VR game? This is a really popular VR game. It looks like it may just have a lot of asset flips and kind of a story. It is tagged as a walking simulator, but people like it. It's not super expensive. It's apparently the couple other games that they're bundling together. Do I want to give this more time, or do I want to make an executive decision to put this in the wish list? I think I give it more time. Honestly, there's a decent argument to just remove it from the pull list, because it's not really showing you a lot. You do seem to just be in this area. No, the other screenshots show some other stuff. So I don't know if the story here is a good enough game. Interestingly, it does seem like it's a walking simulator where the story changes based on which path you walk on, or if you walk away from the expected path. So your decisions may be in the walking, whereas most walking simulators don't even do that much. This game worked. I don't think this really supports English. Just looks like a Chinese game from April 2022. There's no reviews at all on it, so I think there's just a deafening irrelevance there 6 months later. So we can take that off. War Stride challenges. Looks like it's a run and gunner. I guess at a certain point I need to ask myself, do I really want to play a game where you're running and gunning? And it's still early access, so I'll give this some more time. But I wouldn't be surprised if I find that I really don't want a parkour running and gunning experience that looks a lot like what Doom would be if you were really good at Doom. Like, I could see a game like this looking really good in the trailers as far as your actions, and then actually playing incredibly awfully when my hands are holding the controller. Warplanes, World War I fighters. Now, if this worked outside of VR, I think I'd be willing to put this on the wish list and play it. Is it single player? It's tagged VR, but there's not labeled in VR. So this once again is a situation where this game seems to imply you have to play it in VR, but it doesn't have that VR tag, which maybe Steam is just getting rid of the VR tag, and if that's the case, that gives me a great excuse to get rid of VR games. And that's what I'm going to do here, is just get rid of it, because there's just too high of a risk of me buying this and then realizing later that I can't play it because I don't have a VR headset. And then this Warplanes Battle over the Pacific. It's probably no coincidence that there's two games called Warplanes back to back, and we're going through the W's as far as the follow list cleanup. Warp Frontier as a point-and-click adventure game. Alright, well, 92% positive. It's not early access. It's $14.99, which is a lot, certainly. But yeah, I can put that on the wish list. Like, just if there were 3 more negative reviews, it still would be in the positive category. It's not super relevant as a point-and-click game, but point-and-click games are never really that popular or relevant. Warp Drive, on the other hand, is mixed, so it can go away. And then this game, Work and Wobble, I think we get rid of this too, just because it's not relevant. Plus, it's not really the most interesting looking game I'd want to play. More and more, I am just trying to get to a point of playing AA and AAA games more, and giving up on some ambitions of playing smaller indie games. This game is mixed reviewed, so I'm gonna take that off. It's a Warhammer. That's what we're gonna find though, is that most of these Warhammer games are garbage. I'm not sure I've seen a single Warhammer game that succeeds. And so when I added like this Warhammer game just a couple days ago, I already kind of knew. So let's check our mission here. See if we got another duel live. I guess we didn't. I had kind of hoped that that was going to update and that there was another duel live, but I didn't get it fast enough. So yeah, if I have extra time, if I actually care about it, I should make an effort to play more of this festival. We'll open tin packs here. is that we've got like 4 new cards, and that's it as far as these legacy pack cards. Really, these legacy packs, since they're only giving you 2 cards anyways, it should just be, we're giving you 2 cards right after a game. It should be a reveal to say, hey, you just got this card. I'm going to show you this specific screen where you see the art of the card, you see the attack, the defense, you see the effects, you see the number of stars, and even this is not really getting spelled out when there's plenty of text room here to spell it out. Same is the case here. But yeah, once you bundle it and then I just quickly open 10 packs, I can easily glaze over the cards. Alright, well, let me then quickly reload my Twitter feed, and then that'll be it for today's stream. Seems like we've lost Sniper Rifle, Sniper Ranger on the chat. Now, it's been 2 or 3 streams in which we've had nobody chat. Scorn is out now, so we're going to start seeing some reviews around Scorn, which that'll be interesting to talk about on Monday, as far as just, is Scorn actually a game that has gameplay worth playing, or is it just heavily relying on its looks and appearance and that H.R. Geiger or H.R. Giger-esque art style. One of the things I think with Disney's announcement of of new bundles for Disney and Hulu Plus and ESPN is really, I think, just highlighting how expensive all these streaming services have gotten once again, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot of reevaluation on that, or tightening of the belts. We didn't see an article here. Activision Blizzard is now facing another sexual harassment lawsuit, and Activision Blizzard recently told game developer the company has no kind of tolerance for this kind of misconduct. I imagine we will see lawsuits continuously getting filed, because obviously Activision Blizzard has had a bunch of problems there. This is weird. 2K is giving out codes for platform. There's 2 hours ago. Almost certainly these codes have been used for PGA Tour 2K23. Yeah, if I was going to make a better Twitter, the first thing I would definitely do is have a giveaway feature built in. Like a secure giveaway feature, a money transferring feature. It would be like an everything app is what it's called. It would definitely be more focused around doing everything for everybody and being the app that you launch to do pretty much everything together. Shopping features, things like that. Try to have different separated categories so you aren't just getting ads like crazy through your news feed, but really having a news feed that is actually public news versus having a private feed that's just your friends and family. I would be very, very ambitious if I was going to try and make some kind of competitor to Twitter. But also, I would have to know, I would need all kinds of angel investors and all kinds of money and development. And my ideas would require teams and teams of programmers to try to implement those ideas. Speaking of implementing new ideas, Valve overhauled the Steam mobile app to include now QR sign-ins and a fresh look. They've completely revamped the way it looks, which is great. I've noticed that a few apps have updated with QR code logins. I assume that the QR code logins really are more about implementing the FIDO standard that they have recently launched, as far as getting rid of passwords once and for all. I still feel like there's a significant number of websites that would have to embrace integrating the FIDO standard. It's not just built in by default or built into the browser. Maybe we will start to see Chrome, though, build it in, because there is a possibility, I suppose, that you could have a website that only accepts 20 characters at most as a password, which I literally just went into a website that I had to sign up for that accepted 20 characters at maximum. And maybe they will start just to put random codes into those password fields and then not even tell you what those random passwords are, and in favor of QR code sign-ins as a almost man-in-the-middle assistant thing, where when you go to log into an old website that wants you to type in a password, Chrome, instead of just saying, hey, I'll fill in this password by default, it may say, scan this barcode anyways. And maybe that'll work sometimes, and maybe that won't make a lot of sense sometimes, depending on whether or not you're trying to log in on a cell phone or a desktop. Alright, well, anyways, there really isn't any other news, so that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.